Don't confuse memorization with learning having taken place. Welcome back to the channel. And if you're finding these fail focus videos helpful, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. This is a new channel. We're going to be putting out all kinds of content to help PDIs around the country achieve their ultimate goal of becoming ADIs. We're going to be putting out more fail focus content, pass point content, as well as loads of other stuff that's in the pipeline very, very soon. So please help me reach other PDIs and support as many people as I can by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Today's video is a perfect example of how a well-intentioned lesson can fall flat on its face without the appropriate kind of variety and progression. So let's get into that. We're going to start with Sophie's feedback. So Sophie took her pupil Connor, who's done about 25 hours of lessons, to the part 3 test. This was Sophie's first attempt, and I'm going to start by reading her comments to you. So Sophie said this. Sophie's plan was for the session to build on Connor's confidence when it comes to anticipation in meeting situations. Particularly, Sophie wanted to work around more narrow roads and worked around the kind of meeting situations where there are a lot of parked vehicles. The idea was to get Connor scanning early and positioning proactively so that he could be anticipating and planning in response to his environment. Sophie decided to base the session around a familiar loop that she was using regularly with her pupils. And it was a collection of a few roads that she was planning to use because she knows these roads, and she knows that these roads are very good when it comes to offering consistent opportunities for those meeting traffic situations. Sophie said that she felt it was a calm and safe environment and that she believed it would help Connor settle into that session and show his understanding. After the test, Sophie said that she just wanted to make sure that Connor could really nail those meeting situations. The roads that she picked always had a good mix of meeting traffic situations, so she thought repetition would help him sharpen up. That was the conversation, or that was the message Sophie sent me. So Sophie and I actually had a phone call, and I wanted to delve a bit deeper into that because there were still some gaps in what she was telling me. I wanted to be sure on what she was saying from her perspective. So when I spoke to Sophie, she told me that the examiner felt that there wasn't enough variety and that the loop was too repetitive. Hence that last paragraph in her feedback about, she just wanted to make sure that Connor could really nail it and pick up on all of the details from those roads, because those roads were roads that would offer a lot of meeting traffic situation. So now I'm starting to build a picture as to what's gone on here potentially. So then we looked at the examiner's feedback. Here's what the examiner had to say. The examiner actually acknowledged that the start of the session had a clear vision and a clear lesson plan that showed Connor's genuine learning needs. So the vision that Sophie had was the correct vision for the lesson based on Connor's needs. So that's a great starting point. The examiner also said that Sophie had coordinated a lesson that was calm and friendly in the environment, which was optimum kind of conditions for Connor to strive under. But the session very quickly became repetitive. The examiner noted that Connor was taken around the same few streets over and over and over again, with little to no variation in the challenges he faced. He became familiar with the hazards simply through repetition, not through actual development, not through actually understanding on a deeper level what, how, when, why. So he was learning through memorization, which is not the same as progression. I'm going to talk more about that in a moment. The examiner also said that although Sophie offered occasional commentary and reminders and she tried to engage the pupil, she missed several opportunities and chances to stretch Connor, and ultimately she missed opportunities to transfer skills to different contexts. The session remained in the comfort zone, too much so, and by the end there was no clear evidence of progress beyond simply memorizing that same set of 4 or 5 roads. If you've watched my videos before, you'll know that I generally try to summarize the examiner's feedback so that we can really get to the root of the problem. So the summary of what the examiner's saying, well, the first thing that he's definitely trying to get across is that this lesson lacked variety. We used the same few roads over and over and over again to the point where it stopped really benefiting the lesson. We were just learning those few roads, and we're not really transferring the learning to different situations. As a result of that, there was no real progression. So the pupil, as I said, remembered the roads. The pupil remembered rather than developing and transferring skills to other places. And I'm going to explain to you how we know that, because I then spoke further with Sophie about what exactly had gone on. There were missed learning opportunities, so we didn't move the learning forward and apply those skills elsewhere. Lastly, the examiner felt that the risk was low, but also so was the challenge. So we didn't showcase the full range of teaching competencies because we've kept things almost too safe and too secure. There is such a thing as the lesson being safe because the lesson was inappropriately easy. It didn't challenge or stretch the pupil just enough. So what could a pass have looked like? I do try and offer some ideas as to slight changes into how this lesson could have looked such that it could have been a pass. First and foremost, the most obvious and apparent thing that we could have done was started the lesson in the area we did. Absolutely, I'm all in favor of that. But then there has to come a time where we move the pupil to a new environment, to a new set of conditions, to a slightly different version of possibly very similar roads with similar features, so that we can test the transfer of those skills. Sophie, this is the most important thing that I want to get across to you, because I've seen this happen in sessions. I have sat in sessions where the PDI takes the pupil to the same set of roads over and over and over. And I mean, I'm talking the same loop, the same left turns for 45 minutes to an hour. And I know what has happened in your session because we spoke on the phone, and for anyone watching this video, essentially what had happened was the examiner gained all of this evidence that the pupil wasn't learning transferable skills, they were memorizing the route. So how do I tell the difference? Have you really got evidence that they have learned, that they have understood, and they can take that away and to some degree, it doesn't have to be perfect, but to some degree can apply that learning somewhere else, even maybe just somewhere similar, but somewhere else? I'm reminded of a session I sat in the back of that was very similar to this, Sophie, and we went around the same roads over and over and over again, and we did that for an hour. And while the pupil made fractional progress, it was impossible for me to evidence that the pupil had genuinely learned, because if they had genuinely learned, they would be able to apply, at least in part, what they've learned somewhere else. It doesn't have to be perfect, as I said. But the evidence in that session was that they had just memorized that road. And so if they have memorized that there is there's that white van just parked around that corner, so I'm going to go a bit slower, that's not development of skills and anticipation and planning and progress and awareness. It's not. They've just remembered because the last 7 times we've driven around that corner, there's that parked van, and they're mentioning the parked van. Okay, so that's evidence that they are memorizing. What would progress look like in an almost identical situation? Well, perhaps after they'd gone round 6 or 7 times and seen the parked van, maybe on a different corner, maybe not even that far away, if the visibility is poor and they start talking about the possibility of what could be round that corner, and then they start adjusting their driving in accordance with what could be around the corner, that could be progress of learning and understanding and development having taken place. Absolutely. But in the session I observed, and certainly from the conversation that we had, Sophie, it doesn't sound like that's what was happening. It sounds like the pupil is constantly referencing the white van because they know the white van's there. They're not referencing the possibility of people could be crossing the road. They're not referencing the possibility of visibility into the junction. They're not referencing the fact that they can't see round the corner, so there could be absolutely anything round that corner. And they're not adjusting for any eventuality. They're adjusting and planning for the van. Now, the good news is this. This should be one of the easiest things in the world to test. If I, as a trainer, or if your examiner, thinks that that pupil is learning through memorization, and you disagree, and you feel that that pupil has actually learned transferable skills, then take them somewhere else. And they should be able to, some degree, apply that learning. If it takes a sudden or a sharp or a notable dive in standard, then maybe there's something to think about. But the clue is how your pupil is thinking and speaking and what they are verbalizing. That will tell you if they're memorizing or if they have a deeper, greater understanding. The other things you can do is ask your pupil to confirm and validate and justify and explain their decisions as to why they're doing it. The way we use coaching questions, the way we use prompts, the way we provoke thought, all of these things will provide evidence that learning has taken place, that understanding is occurring. But again, in the session I observed and in the conversation that we've had, Sophie, I didn't hear any of this. I have no evidence to suggest that learning has taken place because we're not maximizing coaching questions and facilitating learning, and we're not exploiting that pupil to different scenarios. So I have only got to go by what I'm seeing, and what I'm seeing is a pupil so far memorizing. They're not necessarily getting better. We must move the pupil on to a different set of environments and conditions, albeit very similar, albeit very close to the original selected roads, to showcase that the pupil is actually learning transferable skills and understanding the learning rather than just memorizing that route. Something that you could have tried in that session maybe would have been to just pull up for a couple of moments halfway through the session and take 30 seconds for you and your pupil to reflect on how's it going, what's going well, what can we change, what can we hand over so that we can try and demonstrate development and progression, where can we go that would still allow me to exploit these environments for the meeting traffic, but also test my pupil and stretch them in new conditions. Take 30 seconds in your session to just have a really quick conversation with your pupil. Reflect on how it's going, reflect on what's going well, reflect on what you want more of, what needs to be developed, and then just take a moment to decide, what does this lesson need? I say this so often. You have 45 minutes to showcase 17 competencies. It goes so fast. So fast. Now, I'm not saying that you can't demonstrate those 17 competencies in the same 4 roads. But if you are making just the same 4 turns with no variety of direction or change in circumstances, you run the risk of exactly what has happened. Identify the need. Practice developing that need. Progress that need even further, and then try it elsewhere. That's a really important distinction. Have we learned something that we can then transfer somewhere else? If you can't transfer that somewhere else, something isn't right. If you don't feel confident that your pupil can transfer it somewhere else, or your pupil doesn't feel confident, we haven't quite learned what we need to learn. Because remember, skills are transferable. Ultimately, the lesson didn't evolve. So I've put together 5 top tips for you, Sophie, as you go forwards. And if you're watching this video and you're concerned that you might be susceptible to the same tendency, I hope that this list will help you. So the first point, don't confuse memorization with mastery. Variety is essential for long-term development. We have to change something, even if it's just a mild change. 2, use repetition to build confidence, absolutely, but not as a substitute for progression. 3, think in layers. Start small, absolutely, but you should always be aiming to stretch and apply new context, new environment, slightly new variations of the same challenges so that we can gain evidence that the pupil is learning skills that can be applied elsewhere rather than memorizing. Number 4, how are you going to plan for progression? I often tell people, don't try and plan the perfect lesson, but there has to be some kind of version of progression that you account for when you're planning your lesson. So what will the progression potentially look like as this lesson goes forward? And a simple thing to consider when you're asking that question is, once we've done it well, what can we change to make it slightly more challenging and evidence progress? And lastly, if it feels like the pupil is coasting, they almost certainly are. So step it up, adapt the plan, adjust the environment, even if it's just slightly, even if it's just a slightly different direction, and drive learning forward. Don't confuse memorization with learning having taken place. I'm going to end this video by saying thank you for tuning in. If this breakdown has helped you, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. It really helps us and me grow the channel and the community and help as many people as we can. And remember, if you're looking for exclusive, structured support, including bonus content, bottom line information on what you need to pass your part 3, and live sessions, we've got you covered. And I'm going to leave a link in the description as to how you can access member options for specific direct support in your journey into becoming a qualified ADI. Thank you for watching. Keep going, keep growing, and we'll see you in the next video.